The state of West Virginia has played home to one of the most bizarre pseudocryptids ever reported, the unusual, but by no means unique, Mothman. The first sighting came in the early 1960s. A woman was riding along Route 2 near the Ohio River with her father. As she neared the cheap cornstalk hunting grounds, a large man-shaped figure walked out onto the road. As the woman slowed her car, the figure spread two large wings and took off. Ironically, the witness did not report the incident, saying, "Who would believe us anyway?" The first sighting, which received publicity though, was one in 1965. A woman living near the Ohio River related how her son had told her one day of seeing an angel outside. She thought nothing more of it until about a year later. In the summer of 1966, a doctor's wife in the same general area said that she had seen a 6-foot-long thing resembling a giant butterfly. On November 12th, 5 gravediggers saw something which looked like a brown human being fly out of the trees near Clendenin. One of the witnesses, Kenneth Duncan, said that they watched the creature for almost a minute. On the 14th of the month, Salem resident Newell Partridge saw 2 red objects hovering above a field. His German Shepherd, Bandit, took off into the field and was never seen again by Partridge. The next night, Mr. and Mrs. Roger Scarborough and Mr. and Mrs. Steve Mallet were driving near the TNT area, near the town at Point Pleasant. A tall figure stood by the side of the road. "It was shaped like a man, but bigger," said Mr. Scarborough. "Maybe 6.5 or 7 feet tall, and it had big wings folded against its back." His wife commented on its huge red eyes, like automobile reflectors. Mr. Scarborough, who was driving, took off his car at better than 100 miles per hour. The figure spread its wings and flew after the car. It didn't seem to flap its wings at all, and its wingspan was over 10 feet. Mrs. Mallet said that it made a squeaking sound, like a big mouse. The 4 also noted that a dead dog had been lying on the side of the road, but was gone when they returned. They went to the offices at Mason County Sheriff and reported their sighting. Deputy Millard Halstead returned to the TNT area with the 4 and said that as he passed the spot where they had initially seen the figure, his police radio made a similar sound to a speeded-up record. The TNT area, which seemed to be some sort of home for the Mothman, as it was quickly dubbed by the press, is a large tract of land. Small concrete igloos dot the landscape, used during World War II to store ammunition. The TNT area is adjacent to the 2,500-acre McClintic Wildlife Station. The entire area is covered with dense forest, steep hills, and riddled with tunnels. The area is also sparsely populated. One of the families living in the area is that of Ralph Thomas. On the 16th, at about 9 p.m., Mr. and Mrs. Raymond Walmsley, Mrs. Marcella Bennett, and Mrs. Bennett's daughter, Tina, were visiting the Thomases. On the way there, they watched a red light which circled the TNT area. When the car pulled up in front of the Thomases, it disturbed something. It seemed as if it had been lying down. It rose up slowly from the ground, a big grey thing, bigger than a man, with terrible, glowing eyes. The witnesses ran to the Thomases' home, where they were let in by the 3 children. The figure shuffled along behind them, coming to the porch and looking through the window. Mr. Walmsley called the police, but the thing had, of course, vanished by the time they arrived. Mrs. Bennett, who lives on the edge of Point Pleasant, says she has heard the creature on other occasions. She describes the sound it makes as like a woman screaming. Paul Yoder and Ben Enochs, 2 firemen, said they had seen Mothman in the TNT area on the 18th. Richard West of Charleston called the police on November 21st. A winged figure was sitting on the roof of his neighbor's house, he said. The 6-foot-tall figure had a wingspan of 6 or 8 feet and red eyes. It took off straight up, like a helicopter, he described. Thomas Urey was driving along Route 62 near the TNT area on the morning of November 25th. He saw a large, greyish figure standing in the field. Then it spread 2 large wings, lifted straight into the air, and flew over Urey's car at an altitude 3 telephone poles high, he said, probably about 50 or 60 feet. The next day, Mrs. Ruth Foster of St. Albans said the creature was standing in a yard near her porch. Her description tallies with West's. The same day, people in Lowell, Ohio, saw several large birds flying over Cat's Creek. The 3 witnesses followed the birds in their car and said that they were dark brown with some light flecks. Their breasts were grey and they have 5 or 6-inch bills, straight, not curved like those hawks or vultures. The birds seemed to have reddish heads. And still more sightings came. On November 27th, on the way home from church, Connie Carpenter saw a greyish figure standing on the golf course near Mason. The creature took off and flew straight towards her car. She was one of the few who actually saw the creature's face, although her description, "It was horrible," doesn't help much. Another sighting took place at the same night in St. Albans, where 2 girls saw the creature near a junkyard. The creature flew after them. On December 4th, 5 pilots in the Gallipolis, Ohio airport saw some sort of giant bird flying at about 70 miles per hour, and unlike other witnesses, they commented on a long neck. Mabel McDaniel, coincidentally mother of Linda Scarberry, one of the first witnesses, saw Mothman on January 11th, 1967. Mrs. McDaniel is quoted saying, "The creature looked like an airplane. Then she realized it was flying much too low. It was brown and had a wingspan of at least 10 feet. In March, an Ohio man claimed his car was chased by a flying creature. The last sighting seems to have come on November 2nd, shortly after noon. Mrs. Ralph Thomas, from Bennett sighting, heard a squeaky fan belt outside her home and saw a tall, grey figure moving among the concrete domes in the TNT area. Scattered sightings continued for several years afterwards. In 1968, especially, a number of hairy humanoids with glowing eyes was seen on Jericho Road. And on September 18th, people in the TNT area supposedly saw Mothman once more, putting in his last appearance, it seems. In late 1966, when the Mothman report started to die down, other phenomena started up in the area. Several UFOs were seen near Point Pleasant. Animals were mutilated in surrounding areas, and Mothman witnesses reported poltergeists and Men in Black phenomena. This has led many a researcher to speculate a connection between Mothman and UFOs. But no discussion of the Mothman phenomenon would be complete without recounting the story of the Silver Bridge. On the evening of December 15th, 1967, the Silver Bridge, which crossed over Ohio River at Point Pleasant, collapsed in rush hour traffic. Over 46 cars fell in the river. It was the biggest disaster to hit Point Pleasant. Of course, it was only a matter of time before people began to connect this disaster with the Mothman sightings. Was Mothman some sort of warning sign of the impending disaster? Was the entire saga somehow connected with the UFOs seen in the area? As a final postscript, New Haven farmer Ernest Atkins reported something very odd indeed in April of 1969. He found his 11-week-old beagle lying dead in his front yard. There was no evidence the dog died in a fight, Atkins said. What made it strange was the fact that the dog's chest was chewed open and its heart was lying outside. Not surprisingly, most scientists scoffed at this theory. They said it was probably just some normal kind of bird. The favourite culprit was a sandhill crane. These large birds have reddish patches on their head, accounting for Mothman's red eyes. These large birds have reddish patches on their heads, accounting for Mothman's red eyes, and a large specimen would reach roughly the size attributed to Mothman. But other birds were found in the area that could account for the sightings. In July of 1967, several boys found a large vulture near New Haven, and at Gallipolis Ferry, a farmer shot a rare bird indeed, an Arctic snow owl. The owl was 2 feet tall and had a 5-foot wingspan.